Greetings, brothers and sisters. Shalom, assalamu alaikum, adnastana. I'm just getting ready to leave for the lodge here this evening. And I thought I'd pause briefly and talk about this particular segment that you're about to see. This particular segment emulates from a conversation that I had late last year during a meeting of my lodge, where we were voting on a brother who was going to be raised to his next degree at the following meeting. At that particular meeting, I suggested we move two other brothers up with him who had the same degree as him. I said, well, while we're doing this, why don't we raise some others? And I was checked by my worshipful master, who said we move people to the next degree when they're ready. And as you'll hear me mention this during this particular segment, I don't like to admit it, but he was right. Right. However, it did lead me to ask that question: what criteria should we be using? What criteria do other organizations use? In esoteric fraternalism, right? These degrees are very important, right? So in this particular segment, it's another one of those segments where, as you've often heard me say, we will get different people's opinions on it. Some of them you've seen before here on Points of Light Radio. Some of them you have not. So I'm really looking forward to it because like I said, I love introducing new people to you, but I also love having old friends back here. So let's move forward. As you always hear me say, let's move forward. Let's have this conversation, right, about the criteria of moving up between different degrees.
Ladies and gentlemen, seekers of light and secret knowledge wherever you may be, you are listening to Points of Light Radio, the podcast dedicated to taking you past the apron and behind the closed doors of lodges everywhere. And here is your host, Stan Miller.
First, let's talk to David Cousteau, our old friend David Cousteau. Now, he's dropped by to fellowship with us recently and talk about his experience when he joined the Morgan County Moose Lodge 1857 and the Pikes Peak Moose Legion number 156 in Colorado. He took the degree of service. I want to know what it takes to be raised to the different degrees in the Loyal Order of Moose. Now, you recently took your Moose Legion degrees, I believe you called them?
Yeah, it's the degree of service.
Okay. So there's only one, or there's several of them?
There's 3 degrees for the men in Moose. The first one's the degree of service.
Okay.
And then the second one is the fellowship degree of honor. And then the third one is the pilgrim degree of merit.
Now, do you take them all in one day, or is there a gap?
No. So it actually, I'm not 100% on this, but I think it takes at least 5 years to get your next degree, the fellowship degree of honor. And it's one of the things that I really respect about the degrees in the Moose are that you can't just be like, oh, I got my degree, okay, on to the next one. To get your next degree, I think you have to be a Moose Legion member for at least 5 years.
Good.
You have to at least served on the board, possibly even been the president of their Moose Lodge. And you have to have so many people. So you also have to sponsor so many people into the Moose Lodge.
Okay, so there's work involved. I like that.
And the pilgrim, I think, is somewhat similar. One guy told me it usually takes people close to 20 years to get their pilgrim degree.
Yeah, and I like that because I had this conversation in my lodge recently. I was quite rightly checked by my worshipful master, but we had that conversation about people moving to the next degree, and he said we raise them when they're ready, not just because they've been in for And I really do. He was right. I don't like to admit it, but he was right because, your attendance, everything, you have to take that into account.
Yeah.
And I like that. Work in the
Yeah.
lodge, stuff like that. Now, my brother Ian McFarland from the the Rollins White Memorial Loyal Orange Lodge 803 in the United Kingdom, sent me an audio clip. Hey, pipe down over there. Okay, an audio clip of the criteria they use to move people up through the degrees in the Orange Lodge, United Kingdom.
Hi Stan, Ian McFarland here, just a little bit of information for you. Rollins White Memorial LOL 803 of Cardiff falls under the authority of the Grand Orange Lodge of England. In the English system there are 3 degrees, the Orange, the Purple and the Royal Arch Purple. In Ireland, in the Orange Institution, there are only the Orange and the Purple. And the Royal Arch Purple is an entirely separate organisation. In Scotland, there are only the Orange and the Royal Arch Purple, but no Purple degree. And I believe the Canadian system is different to those again. So there are differences between the systems operated by Grand Orange Lodges throughout the world. So in England or Wales, a member joins and is initiated into the Orange degree. Then, during his first 6 months of attending meetings, they learn a little bit about our culture, history, faith and procedures. After 6 months of learning and observing, he can be proposed to be advanced to the Purple Order, which will give him more knowledge on the overall institution, what we believe in and what we stand for. And after a further 6 months of attending meetings, he can be proposed to be raised to the Royal Arch Purple degree, which is his final degree of travel within the organisation in England. This is a special degree and an important day for the brother. The degree is not carried out by his own private lodge, but by a provincial lecture class. This will usually happen within 6 months of being proposed for the Royal Arch Purple degree. And this is the culmination of the brother's travel in England. And after that, he will have enough learning and experience to hold office within his lodge, usually starting at one of the lower offices such as the Tyler, before working his way up and hopefully through time becoming Worshipful Master. This is very much dependent on the lodge and the brothers within that lodge. In my opinion, the English system works as there is a period of learning and involvement for the brother of between 1 to 2 years from his initiation to his Royal Arch Purple degree. And this is seen as a commitment both on his behalf to the lodge and from the lodge towards him, and putting him forward for the sublime degree and the future responsibilities such a role can carry.
Let's go talk to Sigurd Eagleson. He's a member of Temple Ritter Orden in Iceland. There's 12 degrees to their organization. Let's see how they go about raising brothers to the next degree.
I am currently on a 2nd degree. There are 12 degrees total.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I should be.
Is there a time limit you have to wait between the degrees, or is there certain steps you have to take before you move between the degrees?
Attendance is an important thing.
Okay, yes, that's good.
Attend the meetings, and there is usually like a year between the degrees. So it's not like an automatic process. You have to attend and you have to learn and you have to, be in the program to receive the next degree.
Okay, yeah. And like I said, there's other things involved, like learning, memory work, things like that involved in it as well?
No, not so much memory, but there is like rituals that can be quite big and take a long time. But you don't have to remember much, and you get help if you get into some kind of trouble for some reason. If you have to answer like a question and you're not sure how to answer it, there is always someone who can help you with it in some way.
Okay. Now, and as I've said before as well, you, I kind of like that actually, that they want to see you at the lodge.
Yeah.
Some people just get a degree and they disappear. You can't do that. I like that. They're making you earn.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I agree with you. It's been a while since we talked to Steve Dunkelberger. He's a member of a number of organizations. I know that he's a member of the Knights of Pythias as well as the Oddfellows. Let's see how he feels about the criteria for moving people up to that next degree. So Steve, what do you think is the right time for degrees? Now, some organizations demand, as far as like from what I've studied, sometimes they demand a certain amount of time, shall we say, almost in that degree.
Mm-hmm.
Others go by memory work and attendance. What do you feel is the ideal time to raise a brother or sister to that next degree?
Well, I guess it really sort of depends on the organization. So it is sort of dependent on that. But I guess the general rule is, get the first one as soon as possible, so they have ownership, so they're no longer a probationary period or just a tag along or whatever it is. And then, once they've, I guess once the lodge thinks that they're ready, then progress on up. And I guess it depends on, some are more intricate than others. Some are based on memory work and ritual knowledge and that sort of thing. And some of them are just kind of like, well, it's probably about time. And it is a matter of look at the organization for the leadership potential of them, and if they know, and their experience with other fraternal lodges certainly helps. But yeah, you want to get that first one out, and then dangle the. I guess again, it does, like I said earlier, depends on how many you have. So if you only got 3 or 4, then you sort of want to do it less.
I have heard, though, some do believe in the idea of attendance, and I personally think in some ways you do have to use attendance at least as a bit of a measuring stick, because I have been in organizations where a person shows up, they get their initiatory degree, and then you don't see them for a while, and then they move up to the next degree. Well, that should not be as automatic, shall we say. They should have tried to prove that they really want to be there in the lodge, because some of the work we do in the lodge and some of the learning you can do just in regular business meetings is important. Would you not agree?
Oh yeah, I mean, I guess I would think. I guess it doesn't necessarily be time, but yeah, I mean, either service to the lodge or just showing up.
Yeah, you have to be there.
Each degree has to mean something.
Exactly.
Versus just punching a card. Then you're actually shortchanging that person in the long run, because they're just like, oh yeah, I went through I went through and I became from a new member to the highest rank in 6 months. That may not mean anything, and then therefore the lodge means nothing.
Yeah, exactly. And the other thing is, I have seen guys work their way through the degrees and hardly show up, and then all of a sudden when they get that last degree, they just kind of disappear. You can't have that. It has to mean something. I think you'll agree.
Yeah. Well, and I also think that you have to always have something to strive for.
Yeah.
In most whether it's the degrees and then running through the chairs of officers, you got to have something you're working toward. Making future leaders, making either in the community or in the lodge itself, or just better people. If you just run them through just to get the card punch, that means nothing to no one.
Next, I'll bring you part of an interview I did with a gentleman named Bork Mancini. He is the Noble Grand of the Loyal Carnubian Oddfellows Lodge in the United Kingdom, right? Let's see how they advance people through odd fellowship degrees. Now, you talked about degrees. You talked about the initiatory degree. Now, I understand there are about 4 degrees to odd fellowship. Now, what are the requirements of advancement to that next degree? Do you have to have
Right.
you have to do memory work or
member,
time in, or
it's been made pretty simple these days. If a member, I mean, we don't force the study of degrees onto our members anymore. But if a member chooses to take part in that traditional ceremonial side of Odd Fellowship, we encourage it. I mean, I have. There are, as you say, they take their initiation degree or lecture, and that basically introduces them to Odd Fellowship. It's held in a lodge room, which is normally dressed with the traditional fittings of the lodge. We have candles burning. We dress the part with our aprons and collars, cuffs, and so on. And they're introduced to the lodge, and that's done in pretty formal fashion. If they choose to progress, that entitles them to wear the 3-link badge, the 3-link badge of Oddfellows the world over. If they choose to progress, there are 4 lodge degrees, which are named after colours: white, blue, scarlet, and gold. And that basically they can advance through those, and those are the ultimate degrees which can be achieved within the lodge. Now, I've done them all. Past that, there are what we call past officers degrees, and to achieve those, you need to have been Noble Grand of a lodge. Well, I have already served as Noble Grand of a different lodge, but there's the past Noble Grand's degree, past Secretary's degree, and so on. Once you achieve those past officer's degree, then quite an auspicious degree, the next degree will be the purple degree. And the purple degree is quite a demanding degree to take. And it takes you to that next level of Odd Fellowship. Beyond that, we do have Grand Lodge, and there is a degree to enter you into that. And Grand Lodge meets every year. It meets at our annual movable conference, which is like the national annual general meeting. And obviously with Grand Lodge, only people who are of that level can actually participate and achieve that final degree of Odd Fellowship.
let's talk to Austin Schifrin. You may recall him from a previous segment of Points of Light Radio where he shed some light on the tall cedars of Lebanon. And he's a Freemason down in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Let's see what criteria the Freemasons use when raising people through the different degrees of Freemasonry. And even in Freemasonry, when do you raise people to that next degree? I wanted to ask you this. Like, I know, like I said, I got checked in my lodge recently by my worshipful master who I was talking about moving some people up to that next degree, and he went, no, we move them when they're ready. And I can say, I don't like to admit it, but he was right. Like, I know in Freemasonry you have memory work, but is there not shall we say, a scrutiny about lodge attendance as well and things like that? Work done?
I think you're raising really valid questions. And even if it isn't directly applicable to the Cedars, I definitely don't mind getting into that topic right now either. So look, you have as much as we strive to emphasize homogeneity and harmony and towing the line in our lodge systems, you do have different blue lodges operating somewhat different from each other, somewhat. Okay. And I think that memory work is at least a bare minimum, right?
Yeah.
If a fella is interested enough in progressing from his EA to his fellowcraft, if he can at least demonstrate that he's putting in the effort to learn his oath and obligation, right? I think it's very reasonable for a lodge to hold that man to that bar and say the lodge is within their discretion to say we want to see you memorize this word for word. They could also take the alternative approach and say we want to see that you've at least made the effort to memorize this oath before we're willing to confer this next degree upon you. And if you haven't got it memorized verbatim, if from our review of you, if from our conversation with you, we get the sense that you've come to a genuine understanding and appreciation of the principles that oath and those working tools and the other components of your degree work we're supposed to be teaching you, if we think that you genuinely process the ethical lessons, it's okay to hold that guy to that bar instead. Now, in Pittsburgh, I'm a member of our traditional observance lodge, Lodge Ad Lucem. And we have a set of criteria that says that a candidate who wishes to progress from one degree to the next needs to memorize his oath verbatim. Okay. He needs to memorize the working tools lecture verbatim. He needs to know his steps and signs, and he needs to produce one research paper.
Whoa.
So some guys may move from degree to degree within a matter of a couple of months. Some guys might take a year. And we don't look down on any of our brethren who are working their way through that process for how long it takes them, because we can all sympathize that if we have that many components that we wish them to accomplish before they can transition from the one phase to the next, we can't assume it's going to happen rapidly. But what we feel like in my Blue Lodge is that when we do grant that man permission, when he transitions from the one degree to the next, he is going to be genuinely an educated and well-rounded Mason. So we feel like we're producing not just quantity brethren, but good brethren. And that matters to us. And I think it's, if your worshipful master says, hey, we're not going to pass this guy until he's good and ready, I say more power to him.
So did any of what you see here change your opinion on degree work and the structure and the process of attaining degrees? I know it did with me, brothers and sisters. First of all, let's review. Mr. Schifrin believed that in Freemasonry they should pursue quality over quantity. Very important, he said, it takes as long as it takes to move between their degrees. He believed it should take as long as it took to move between degrees in Freemasonry. There should be no stigma of the brother because memory work is a very huge part of Freemasonry. And he said there should be no stigmatizing brothers who just, right, they memorize a little slower than others. So some of them could take a little longer. A person with a really good memory could do their memory work and move to the next degree within 2 to 3 months. Another brother could take a year, but there should be no stigma involved in that. It takes us, they're more interested that you get those working tools from your degree work before advancing to the next degree. Now, Mr. Eggleston said that within Templar Riddler Orden, attendance was a very large part of the criteria considered before raising brothers to the next degree. But there was also a certain time you were supposed to serve or spend in each degree prior to, that was part of the criteria before being raised to the next degree. I will also say that, I'll also mention that Mr. Eggleston recently contacted me and said he'd been raised to the 3rd degree since you last saw him here on Points of Light Radio. Well, congratulations, right? And God bless him for that. Now, Mr. Cousteau said that part of the criteria for moving up in the Loyal Order of Moose is moving up between degrees is time in service, right? There was a time you were supposed to be at each degree. There was also criteria such as positions held within the lodge, chair work, in other words, and in some cases sponsoring new members. So there was a body of work you had to put behind you before moving up to that next degree in the Order of Moose. Now, Brother McFarland from the Loyal... Hey, again with that music? Okay. But Brother McFarland from Rollins Memorial Loyal Orange Lodge 803 in the United Kingdom said that, from what I gathered, and I can tell you right now, this varies between different jurisdictions with the Loyal Orange Lodge. I can tell you it's a little different over here in Canada, but in the United Kingdom, it takes roughly 6 months to move, to be raised to that next degree, shall we say, and one must be proposed for advancement. You do have to be proposed, but I mean, I've saw people in Canada just ask, shall we say, as long, and someone will propose them, but they really want to see, shall we say, a body of work behind you prior to advancing you to the next degree. So, but yeah, that's really, and that makes sense. There are some similarities there between the Orange Lodge in Canada and in the United Kingdom. I know on a personal level, as I've often said, I was raised between from orange to blue, my blue degree here in Canada, within a month or two, but it took me almost a year to be raised to the purple. And then again, part of that, of course, in the Loyal Orange institution is the fact that in some places, like here in Canada, your lodge may not have a degree team, so it could take, you might have to wait till other members are qualified to be raised, okay, so that they could, because the degree team will be assembled from various different lodges. So that's part of what's going on there. Now, Mr. Dunkelberger is a member of multiple fraternal orders, both esoteric and non-esoteric, and he believed that that it depends on the organization. When it comes to the advancement between degrees. However, he did believe that attendance was important. I do concur with that, because I do believe there is learning that you do. Good business meetings, you are going to learn. Properly run business meetings, you are going to learn a certain amount of your lodge work from those meetings. Well, let me ask you, what process or what criteria does your lodge or your organization use when they are exemplifying degrees on their members? Now, you've heard me say this before here on Points of Light Radio, that our lodges offer something special. One of those things is degrees. You've heard this before. Good degree work gives you a lesson, not just for the lodge, but for life. It is, I will say this, it's a mark of maturity on a lodge in many ways when they are raising a brother to their highest degrees. In many ways it is. That brother has earned this. It can be, shall we say, a mark of maturity. If they've learned the degrees, from those other degrees, if they've really learned them, yes, it is a mark of maturity on the lodge, and it's a mark of maturity on that individual as well, how well they're really absorbing that degree work. Right? But these degrees, they are important. I mean, we can't just I believe that we can't just give them away. They need to be earned through time, committee work, attendance. I believe lodges shouldn't be afraid to ask candidates, the candidates that they have for degrees, about what body of work they have achieved to be raised to that. Just why do you feel you should be raised to this degree? Or brothers and sisters, do you, if that brother or sister is not there, brothers or sisters, do you really feel like, how do you feel they've earned this, right? And as a candidate, be sure that you have that body of work behind you before you ask to be raised to that next degree, right? It's all in that word, being raised, right? We rise on our work and our merits. I really do believe that. And I'll close with this. Ecclesiastes 3:1 says, to everything there is a season and a time to every purpose under heaven. And there is a proper time. Don't tell me there isn't, brothers and sisters. There is a proper time to raise that brother or sister to that next degree. Don't tell me there is. All right. And I'll close with that. This has been an absolute pleasure bringing you this particular segment, brothers and sisters. But before I go, I want to remind you that this podcast is available on both YouTube and Spreaker. Please share, like, and subscribe when viewing Points of Light Radio on YouTube. I also welcome your comments and input. And this is one of those segments where I really do want to see some input, some comments and input on in the comment section. You can follow Points of Light Radio on my Facebook page at facebook.com/Points of Light Radio. You can see the link to my Spotify channel, as well as my Points of Light Radio store. My X handle is at PO Light Radio. My Bluesky handle is at polightradio.bsky.social. You can see the link to my PayPal, where you can hit on that link, make a voluntary donation to Points of Light Radio, and we will use that donation to move the podcast forward. Brothers and sisters, let's be patient in our degree work. And until we meet again, just step